ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
It all starts with a bizarre customer service experience.
We started to have problems.
As outrage ripples across YouTube, an army of vigilantes is spurred into action.
The one thing you cannot do is try to get somebody's video taken down.
But the stakes are higher than anyone anticipates. Soon reputations will crumble as the feud takes on a life of its own. Beef. Hear the final showdown now on Background Briefing, free on the ABC Listen app.
How easy is it to trick the Australian Tax Office? Well, for fraudsters, it's not hard at all, and plenty have done it, costing taxpayers billions of dollars that have never been recovered. Today, Angus Grigg on his Four Corners investigation into the biggest GST scam in history and how the ATO dropped the ball. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Angus, you have been hard at work looking into what's going on at the Australian Tax Office. And you've really been having a deep look into this huge GST scam. Now, this unfolded in no other than Mildura in northwest Victoria. So take me there and tell me about local resident Sarah.
Yeah, Mildura's a really beautiful town, an irrigation town on the Murray in northwest Victoria. And this GST scam really took off in Mildura. And it really was circulating within a sort of population that you might say is low socioeconomic groups, people on welfare, people with sort of addiction issues. And we went to interview one person called Sarah. She was going through quite a bit of financial hardship at the time. I think she'd separated from her partner, who was facing pretty serious charges at the time as well. And she was short of money because she needed to have some dental work done. So one of her friends showed her how to use a business that had been registered and an ABN linked to GST to claim GST refunds fraudulently.
The people that I was associating with at that time, they had done it and told me how easy it was to get a large amount of money quickly. And I just thought at the time it was a good idea because I was in a bit of financial trouble.
She pretended, if you like, to be a hairdresser, despite the fact that she had no hairdressing qualifications. She'd never worked in a hairdresser, hadn't hired premises, had no equipment. And so she logged into her MyGov account and first of all claimed $15,000 and then did it a second time and got another $15,000.
I don't even really still understand how it went through. I was a single parent and then all of a sudden I'm a hairdresser that's getting this return put into my account with no other payments from clients or anything like that to balance it was needed, like no proof.
Now, bear in mind, the money went into the same account as her welfare payments and the money went within about 10 days without any verification, without any checks, without anyone from the tax office ringing and saying, what did you spend this money on? Do you have hairdressing qualifications? Have you hired premises? She just absolutely couldn't believe how easy it was.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it, that it was just sitting there on my everyday access debit bank card.
Now, the other thing to bear in mind, to receive a GST refund of $30,000, she would have needed to have capital expenditure or bought stock and other items for her hairdressing business of about $300,000. Now, surely a single mother living on welfare, getting family tax benefits, that should have been a red flag for the tax office.
Wow. Okay, so Sarah, which is not her real name,
Yes.
just by the way, you've changed that for this story to keep her anonymous. She just tells the ATO she's a hairdresser and then the tax office falls for it. That's extraordinary.
It is, and the fact that you don't need a receipt, you don't need any proof of the line of work you're in is extraordinary. And that's because the tax office basically fired most of the humans in the loop and started relying on algorithms or computers, if you like, to make these payments. They wanted to ensure the timely payment of GST refunds to businesses, but in doing that, they really opened the door up to fraud.
Right, sure. So the tax office wants to streamline things, but in the meantime, people like Sarah are all of a sudden dabbling in fraud. And as we've mentioned, she's not the only one. There's a lot of other people doing a very similar thing. Tell me about Lyndon Phillips. What was he up to?
Lyndon Phillips, once again from Mildura, for us, he was like patient zero. It looks like he was one of the very, very early people in this scam. So what happens is that Lyndon Phillips gets out of jail in August 2021, and he already has a company registered, and so he reactivates his GST registration through his ABN and his MyGov account. And then within a couple of weeks of getting out of jail, he does what I'd sort of call a test run. And he claims $13,000 in GST refunds from the tax office. Once again, no documents, no receipts, no verification required. He gets that money within a couple of weeks and clearly then thinks, okay, I'm going to go for the big one. And so what he does is he lodges 46 backdated GST claims for an amount of $821,000 in GST. And the real kicker here is that for most of the period those GST claims are lodged, he's actually in jail.
Oh my gosh.
I know, you just couldn't make it up.
What does he do with all that money?
Well, of course he spends it, right? Within a couple of weeks, the money's completely gone. He buys himself a second-hand Porsche. Somewhat endearingly, he buys his mother a house. But the really damning thing here is that the tax office notice it. Finally, there's a human in the loop, and they pick up the fact that, hey, maybe something's a bit wrong here. And so they ring him up and he says, oh yeah, no, it's all legitimate. I'll get my accountant to call you. The accountant never calls. They send him some emails. They write him some letters. He ignores them all. And the really damning thing here is the tax office does nothing for 4 months. And in that 4-month period, this scam absolutely explodes. So what we did is we went back and we deconstructed, if you like, the tax office's narrative. And the narrative was that this fraud took off on social media, the tax office noticed it, they cracked down really hard, really quickly, and they brought it under control. Mm-hmm. Now, we sought about testing that idea.
So the ATO says it did this great job, it cracked down on this fraud, but what actually happened? Because you actually had a look at that and discovered, in fact, the ATO didn't do much at all.
No, exactly. So Lyndon Phillips does finally get caught, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the ATO. It all comes down to the smarts of a local detective in Mildura named Vanessa Powell. Now, she is attending Phillips's house on a drugs and gun charge, and she searches his premises, his house, and she confiscates a phone. And using the sort of smarts that the ATO should be employing, she sees that on his phone there appears to be a pretty elaborate GST scam. And in fact, it looks as though that Lyndon Phillips had helped 60 other people perpetrate this scam. Lyndon Phillips is arrested, and then a few weeks later, the ATO finally launched what they call Operation Protego, which is to crack down on this GST scam.
Wow, okay, and at that point, of course, Sarah, who we spoke about earlier, she was also arrested back in December 2022. But the thing is, the money, it's sort of gone, right?
I can't pay it back. That's not even an option at the moment, or it probably never will be.
Is there any way the tax office can actually get these funds back?
Well, this is the point, right? In the end, $2 billion was stolen from the tax system by 56,000 people. Now, the ATO tell us that of those 56,000 people who perpetrated this scam, just 120, I think it might be 122 now, have been convicted. Secondly, of the $2 billion stolen, the ATO tells us that only 160 million, or around 8% of that, has been recovered.
And Angus, that money, it really is just a drop in the ocean, right? Because you've also looked at all the other funds that the ATO hasn't managed to collect. And you've spoken to Karen Payne. Now, she's a former Inspector General of Taxation. She basically says if the ATO had collected what it was owed, then we would all be paying less tax.
Yeah, Karen Payne, she really focused on what's called collectible debt. And that is this sort of giant number that the ATO doesn't like to talk about. And when she started looking at it, it was about 30 billion, then it rose to about 50 billion. The figure is now $53 billion.
Wow.
And that is the amount of money or taxes that the ATO has levied, if you like, but not collected.
The large percentage of the debts that were due were in fact owned by a very small number of taxpayers, or they're related to a small number of taxpayer accounts. So you'd kind of think it's a small number of people you need to be chasing.
And the point that Karen Payne was making is that if we collected all that tax, perhaps we would not have to pay as much tax, all of us, but also we'd have more money to spend on, really basic things like schools, roads and hospitals.
The fact that it keeps rising is troubling. So it's fundamental, I think, that we've got good administration of the tax system, because the integrity of the tax system is fundamentally important to all of us. It pays for all of the services that we benefit from.
Angus, despite everything that you have said, which is frankly really concerning, the ATO itself thinks it's doing a pretty good job, right? Because Chris Jordan, who was the tax commissioner up until 2024, he's been putting a rather positive spin on the ATO's work.
Yeah, this is the really extraordinary thing. Despite all these scandals, the ATO tells us they are doing a great job. Just before Chris Jordan stepped down as tax commissioner, he did a victory lap, if you like, at the National Press Club, and he pointed out all the great, terrific things that the ATO has done.
We've successfully charted a massive program of transformation. We've cut red tape and we've modernised our administration of the tax system as part of the digital revolution to make tax just happen.
So we have this really concerning problem, is that we have a giant institution with very, very little oversight. And so what people and what experts are putting forward is this idea that we need a new governance structure for the ATO. We need an independent board, we need an independent chairperson who can actually oversee the ATO, report back to the Parliament, to the Minister, and really give us an honest assessment of whether the ATO is serving us well.
Yeah, and until that happens, Angus, we just, as taxpayers, have to bear the cost.
Exactly. We just have to take the word of the tax office that they're doing a terrific job. Bear in mind it was the Gillard government that did promise to bring in an independent board, an independent chairperson to the ATO. Now, that didn't happen, but that's something that should be firmly back on the agenda now.
Angus Grigg is a reporter with Four Corners. You can watch his report tonight on ABC TV at 8:30, or you can catch it on iView. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed. Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Halling. Thanks for listening.